Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be covering a whole bunch of interviews, and by a whole bunch, I'm actually lying. I mean two. There's two interviews. One of them was with Ian Hazacostas. This was done by the PC Gamer website, so that was pretty cool. And the other one was with Corey Stockton, aka Mumper, who, was interviewed by Scott Johnson of The Instance, which, by the way, is a podcast that does get my seal of approval. Oh, and just one quick little IRL thingy to sort of snoop in here. I'm super busy at the minute, so I'm going to have to scale down the production value on one or two videos, and this is one that'll be affected. So, yeah, sorry about that, but hey, it's either that or no video, and I'm going to err on the side of do something. Anyway, interview time. So the first one was with PC Gamers, with Ian Hazacostas, and the very first thing they talked about was the idea of, well, how long will WoW last for? Because of course it has lasted for 10 years, and Ian Hazacostas said that they expect it to last for at least another 10 years. I think the quote was, yes, without question. So yeah, there you go, another 10 years of WoW. If you were scared that it was maybe going to disappear within the next 2 years? Well, it probably won't. Of course, if everyone just decided to leave, I'm sure they'd have to discontinue the game, but I doubt that's going to happen. So yeah, settle in for the long term, I'd say. Now, the other thing that he talked about was that they are trying to focus on a broad range of playstyles when they're designing the game, and really back in the days of like vanilla and TBC, a lot of the people who were playing it were students and they had plenty of time, which is kind of funny to me, but anyway, so yeah, now those people are older, you know, maybe got kids, family, job, etc., and they're not able to play the game to that big hardcore capacity, so they're designing parts of the game to allow for those people to still be able to have a meaningful experience, but then at the same time, designing content so that people can still do full-on raids and PvP, and there's kind of like a ladder to climb for players. And basically, he sort of said that it's really about adding accessibility into the game without the expense of depth. Now, on the topic of all that depth, he said that it's really quite a challenge to provide new content that's kind of fresh and interesting for the experienced people, while still ensuring the game doesn't get bloated to the point where it's overwhelming for new players. He said that in WoD they just basically had a look at a whole bunch of old systems, found the ones that were strong and pure and all that stuff, and they kept them and got rid of the more redundant ones, and that overall the goal was to just remove the bloat of 10 years of class design. Really, I think that this has actually worked out pretty well for most classes. Maybe one or two specs don't come off too well from the ability pruning. Yeah, it's just a bit of a problem. Though you do have to bear in mind that, you know, they did just make a lot of abilities for the sake of adding one. And that is what, one of the things he said in this interview. And then he also said that the cut allows for them to have the space to add cool new abilities in the future when they think it makes sense. And just that currently, you know, they couldn't really do that because people's action bars were just so full and it was a big giant mess. So, hey, that's pretty good. Now, the next thing that they talked about was old content and how there are not necessarily any more plans to redo the old stuff. Ian said that the charm of Outland and Northrend is how they sort of reflect how the game looked back then, and that resource-wise, it's hard to argue that it really makes much sense to redo some of that old content when you could be making a new expansion. I absolutely agree on that point. Though I've got to say, I still think Northrend and, well, you know, to a certain extent Outland both look very pretty. Northrend's got some places which just artistically and, you know, stylistically, maybe if the fidelity isn't great, well, they still, I think, hit a good accord. So, yeah, I still like Northrend. Don't change it, Blizz. Don't change it. Next, let's move on to another point. He said that they do have some more work to do with visual updates for the game. He specifically mentioned Moonkin form. It's not coming for 6.0, but he said it's something they're looking to be, you know, just fixing up in the future. Now, he also talked about some more visual depth for armor with a few examples, you know, being things like, say, a hunter's quiver. Now, this stuff was actually mentioned in a blog post by Blizzard's art director a few months back, and I asked him about it on Twitter, and he said that, of course, you know, it was never planned for 6.0, but that he is happy with how the team's progressing, so hopefully that will come out soon enough, maybe in one of the Warlords patches. I'd say it's the sort of thing that they'll roll out slowly from class to class as we move on. It's not like there'll just be one update which adds all the things. So the next thing the PC Gamer asked was about inspiration from other MMOs. Ian responded by saying that they are pretty much playing every other game in the genre, and they definitely try to look at how they can improve in areas where other games best them, essentially just as a way of keeping up with the industry as a whole. I'm very interested actually on a personal level to see if any of them have been playing Archage, or Arcade even, much, because while I haven't played Arcade, it seems like it's got a lot of really cool ideas, and it would just be interesting to see if any of the WoW people could get some inspiration from even some of those elements. Now, of course, things like this are pretty much expected. The idea of, Blizzard playing other MMOs and other MMO developers playing other it makes sense, You need to play what the competition is making so that you can learn from them. That's how game design works. In a way, it's even collaborative across companies because everyone learns from each other. That's the whole point of discussion, debate, designing and all that stuff. It'd be pretty horrendous if Blizzard didn't learn from other people's good work. Though generally I do think that it seems like Blizzard are definitely able to take an idea and then polish it up to a very good standard and make it fit within WoW. That's certainly one of the excellent strengths that they seem to have as a company. Alright, so next he talks about subscriptions. And this is an interesting one, and especially about how WoW seems to thrive while other MMOs are kind of failing or maybe just jumping ship over to free-to-play. Now, Ian said that it's really hard for him to speak, as to the situation of other games, but he said that for them, the subscription model is the right thing because they apparently, deliver pretty good value for money on it. And I'd say that normally that's the case, but the last 14 months have been an absolute travesty, as most of you would, I'd say, likely agree. I suppose that in times like this, what WoW can do pretty well is still sort of keep going on things like pet battles, gold making, transmog, mount collecting, and then having alts. There is a massive back catalogue of content in World of Warcraft that really dwarfs any new game that comes to the market, so that means that even if WoW doesn't have a patch in 7 or 8 or 9 months, well, there's still a lot of content there, and your ticket, if you saw the subscription as a ticket that gets you in, well, it's still getting you a lot of content, even though some of it might not always be new and shiny. Yeah, it just sucks the whole Siege of Orgrimmar thing happened, and really the next thing that they talked about in the interview was just that. So yeah, PC Gamer asked about, releasing more expansions and things like that, and Ian said that really, they've always been talking about doing more expansions and all that, and, doing them all faster internally, but that they're really sort of ramping up now to be better at doing that, because the team size has really increased, so the Siege of Orgrimmar situation shouldn't happen, but as he said, time will tell. Another point that he made is that right now there isn't really a specific template that they try to fit with expansions, but that they are pretty happy with the number of dungeons and raids that are going on, and also they are happy with the scale of both Pandaria and Draenor. Now personally, I think the Draenor should be a zone larger with at least another 3 dungeons and a battleground. That I think that it maybe is definitely erring on the small side in a few regards. However, that said, these zones themselves are really fantastic, so I suppose that kind of makes up for it. Alright, so next we've got the topic of garrisons. Yay, the thing we've all heard talked about to death. Yeah, so basically, Ian said the usual guff about, the Warcraft RTS inspiration and how choosing the color of your curtains isn't a very Warcrafty thing and, all that stuff. He said, though, more importantly, that they don't have any plans to carry this feature on in future expansions, so they're really just going to see how it pans out in Draenor and then just continue on after they've done that. Currently, it's mainly envisioned as being a Draenor thing, so it's really just a part of this expansion's scope. And he said that on the larger scale of things, it's very important when they add features like this that they decide when to sort of keep them from expansion to expansion and just when to let them be. Because if every single expansion added a garrison-sized feature that had to be supported into the future, it would get to the point where there'd just be a giant overhead on any new expansion because, well, you'd be doing a new expansion, which would automatically mean you would need new raids, new dungeons, new zones, new garrisons, new feature X, new feature Y, new feature Z, etc, 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 moving on to the point where it would just be a kind of crazy bloat that would really slow them down. Really, I do like the garrison feature, and I'm definitely interested to see what lessons they learn from it, but I don't think the garrisons should be directly ported into Azeroth or anything like that after Draenor, because yeah, I don't really think they have the chops to be a feature that stays in the game for the next 10 years as a thing you'll always be doing. I think that would be not a wise decision. Okay, so next I'm just going to talk about the stuff that went on with the instance. So the instance interview was, a bit more casual, a bit more kind of personal, which was certainly great from a listening experience, but, maybe not so much going on in terms of the raw details. And they did talk a little bit about pet battles. In fact, quite a lot about pet battles, but he said that Corey Stockton said that the reason why there are no extra battle pet levels in Warlords is because they feel that it wouldn't add much depth. Essentially, it would be an extra grind that you would have to do, but it wouldn't be more depth in gameplay, and that overall the system is designed around exploring the world and collecting, which I think is definitely good, and really they think this is the best way to carry the feature forward. You know, instead of just bloating out the levels, add new items, add new trainers, add new pets, new things to find and explore. I agree with this, actually. I think this is definitely the right way to do the pet battles. Now, another thing that he talked about was quite interesting, and this does go back to just some of the Pandaria design, but, you know, it was really interesting to hear him talk about game design things, and how, for an example, there used to be a system where you could sell basically any battle pet, but they ended up scrapping that because they think that while it did make a sort of interesting collection and auction house economy sort of gameplay thing, it took away from the core ideal of just exploring the world and collecting things. And yeah, he talked quite a bit about that, and how actually one of the big problems with having a mobile version of Pet Battles would be that it might sort of detract from some of those elements. It was interesting. If you're at all interested in game design, I'd say the Instance podcast interview was really worth checking out. Of course, by the way, just Google the Instance podcast, Google PC Gamer, you can find these websites. I expect y'all to have brains and find things. Okay, so next he said that they do actually evaluate mods quite a bit. Quite the departure from Pet Battles, but essentially they evaluate mods and they try to work out whether they're actually worth adding into the game fully. And also, they like to see that, you know, if a system in the game has got complicated to the point where people feel like they need to mod it to get around it, then really it might be a system worth removing. For an example, reforging. It's one of the reasons why they removed reforging. They realized it was no gameplay. And for a normal person, none of that was particularly intuitive anyway. It was just numbers and balancing them and maths and things that maybe don't have as much of a place in World of Warcraft. I mean, sure, theory crafting is really fun and all that, but as a core game system, I don't think that juggling those numbers was particularly enjoyable, apart from a few specific cases where one class could either have a haste build or a mastery build, and they would both play pretty differently. But that said, that kind of customization sort of still exists in Draenor, because you've got things like gems, you've got enchants, and then your non-armor pieces of gear have got a pretty hefty amount of secondary stats, so there will be customization options to be had. Now finally, Scott asked Corey about some of the smaller projects that they've got going on at Blizzard, and Corey was just talking about, you know, all the cross-team collaboration and cross-company collaboration, all that great stuff. But I think what I want to touch on is the fact that, well, they actually talked a little bit about the Hearthstone Mount and how that was a pretty cool way of encouraging people to do something different. And that's really all that they said, but what I'd like to add is that personally I think that it was a bit of a missed opportunity. They could have done more sort of cross-game stuff when it comes to these various things. I'd like it if I got an achievement in WoW, if that gave me a cool Hearthstone card. Maybe if I got something in one game, you know, another cool thing pops up in another game. Blizzard definitely know that a lot of people play a lot of their games. And, you know, a lot of WoW people play many other Blizzard games. Personally, I play everything Blizzard makes. You know, I enjoy StarCraft, I enjoy Warcraft, Diablo, Here's the Storm, Hearthstone, all that stuff. So really, when you've got an audience like that, I think it does make sense they try to make things as sort of not compatible, like, you know, just have lots of crossover and rewards and fun stuff. And I think WoW is definitely, well, WoW and Hearthstone, because they've got things like card backs and golden cards, and then, of course, achievements, titles, and all that stuff. They're two games that just go hand in hand so well with being able to just easily reward people for doing things. So yeah, maybe there's a bit of a missed opportunity there, but hey, I think it would be kind of cool. Anyway, so that's basically it for the interviews. We found out stuff, I suppose, just interesting hearing more perspectives on these things, especially, you know, things like, say, carrying garrisons forward, some of that stuff about the pet battles, you know, about mods, and of course the subscription thing, and then, you know, hearing the Blizzard absolutely are planning on WoW lasting for more than 10 years. I think that's definitely one of the biggest things that's going on. Then, of course, I'll be interested to see the discussions in the comments about Blizzard sort of focusing on a broader range of playstyles. I don't know, I think it'll be interesting to read what people have got to say on that one, because it's certainly a statement that can be construed in many different ways, and I'm sure there will be people who will be either very positive or very negative about it. But hey, that's it for this video. I'm going to go and get back to work for university. Yep, things are going kind of crazy, so that's fun. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.